Hello everybody, I'm Nate Eaton, and here in our studio today we have the Sheriff of Madison County, Sheriff Ron Ball, and Chief Deputy Vince Kaaiakamanu. And these guys are here to talk about the Daybell trial and the Lori Vallow case. When this trial started 4 years ago, or this case, the investigation began, you guys had different titles and you were at different departments. Sheriff Ball was leading the investigative unit at the Rexburg Police Department, and Chief Deputy Kaaiakamanu was working with the Fremont County Sheriff's Office. So congrats on your new positions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
New-ish positions.
Thank you.
How does it feel to have this whole thing done, at least in Idaho?
Breath of fresh air. It's been a long time. I'm glad it's finally over. I'm glad for everybody that was involved in that, all the officers, the prosecutors, just everybody that's involved in this or in that case can now just step aside and just take a deep breath of air and job well done.
And it's the result you all wanted.
Absolutely.
Yep.
How does it feel for you?
It's awesome. It's like Sheriff was saying, we're done. And during all this, when this is all going on, we also were working other cases. And so now we're done with this and we can focus on other things going on and continue our work. So
For the public that watched the trial, at least Chad Daybell's, it was live streamed, they got to see everything every day. You couldn't because you were under subpoena. You couldn't be in the courtroom every day and hear it. But you could. You were the one officer out of everybody that was there every day as the agent. Is that what they call it?
yeah.
The agent.
Yep.
What was that like to be in there and see everything from start to finish?
The crazy thing with that is on Lori's, I was in the same boat. Mm-hmm. I had to sit out, and Lieutenant Hermosillo was in there the whole time. And so now on the flip side, I'm in there. It's long days. It's great to hear everything. It's something that we went through for 4.5 years, and trying to remember everything is hard. And so just sitting there, being able to look at Chad, look at the jury, it's different. You're getting all that information out, and you're seeing the reactions from both sides.
Right. You testified twice, or was it 3 times? Chad's.
3 times in Chad's, and I can't remember, I think once or twice in Lori's.
In Lori's, right. You were one of the few that were called again. Okay, I want to go back to November 2019 when Rexburg, you were at Rexburg, you got the call that, well, I guess it actually started in Fremont, didn't it, with the Jeep. You got the report from Arizona to check out this missing Jeep.
Yeah.
And then a few days later, the JJ missing welfare check comes in for you guys. And that originally went to Hermosillo, right?
Correct.
But you were overseeing the detective unit.
Right.
So he goes out there to check on JJ, but I think the first image we saw was the body camera footage when you went back with Detective Stubbs.
Right. Yeah.
So what was that encounter like for you?
At the time, it was just another call, really. I mean, Ray called me and told me there was something, he felt like there was something up with this. Something just didn't seem right. So when Detective Stubbs and I went over there, it was just, you didn't think you were dealing with what this ended up to be. There was some information we did have. We knew about the incident down in Arizona with Alex, the possibility of what happened up in Fremont with Tammy. So we were kind of aware of that. But, it was just going in and talking to Lori and saying, hey, Lori, where's these kids at? While we were in there, I don't know what came across or why it came across my mind to ask that, Lori, tell me about Chad. Or, she'd earlier said that Chad was her brother's friend. And
But you knew they were married.
I knew they were married. And when she said that, I was like, well, that's a bit odd to ask that question. So that's when I asked the questions that I did, and got the responses. But it was still just it didn't make sense. But what I think a lot of people don't know is after all this came about, and we kind of started figuring everything out, and we were in the house. We're talking to Lori. She told us that her brother was in the residence with her, but he was upstairs. And as we're sitting there talking to her, if you look up the stairs, there was a light on the wall. And every once in a while, you'd see a shadow go back and forth across that light. And I figured it was probably Alex up there. I don't know if he was pacing or what he was doing, but there was obviously something going on upstairs. And you just had this uneasy feeling about, what's going on here. And when we ended up leaving the house, I was walking with, and I asked Detective Stubbs, I said, Dave, did you see upstairs that shadow going, crossing that light? And he says, you know what, I did. I'm like, we just kind of talked to us, I had an uneasy feeling. And now, knowing what we know now,
there were
you
like
just kind of
47 guns
yeah,
in the garage.
You kind of wonder what would have happened, because at that time, these homicides have been committed. He's had a visit with the police detectives earlier. What if we called him down?
Or what if you went upstairs?
You think about that now, and you're like, man, I don't know what he would have done, how desperate he was, but they obviously they knew it was enough. The gig was basically up at that point that they took off that night.
So in that video, you knew a lot more than you were letting on. Like when you say, Daybell, didn't his wife recently die?
Yeah.
And Lori's
Right.
like, what? I don't know, or plays coy
Right.
a little bit.
I was just trying to get a reaction from her, see what story she was telling me, or that she would tell us. And when she told us what she did, I was just like, well, that's odd. Mm-hmm. That is odd. But she also told us that the kids were down in Arizona, and at that time, that could have been a possibility.
Right. So then you end up going back, and you tell her, have your friend Melanie call us, let us know that JJ's okay. But then you go back the next day or 2 days later, and they're gone.
Yeah, it was the next day, the next morning.
Next morning.
Right.
What did you think when you got there and they're gone? She's gone.
You know what? I don't know what I really thought. Except for there is something bigger here going on. Why would they take off? At that time, the last thing you're picturing in your mind is that, these kids were murdered. That wasn't what the first thing in my mind was like. Well, why would they take these kids and try to hide them just because they're having a feud with Kay and Larry Wilcox over the whether or not they want to see the kids, or a life insurance policy, that Larry and Kay got. It just didn't make sense. But on the other hand, we didn't. At least I didn't, and I think most officers didn't think that we were looking at children who were later found dead.
Right. So you guys are doing this investigation. Fremont's also investigating Tammy's death, and then you've got Arizona, and then you've got the FBI. You've got all these agencies coming together. And Vinny, you're at the time. Were you actively involved in it, or were you just kind of support until you were brought in to help?
So when all this started off, me and Detective Mattingly were just doing our regular things, knowing that this was kind of going on. And that's when Lieutenant Powell was kind of helping with Rexburg and all that. So we're just kind of in the background, helping out where we can, but not really investigating it with everybody. And so with the Jeep, Lieutenant Powell was helping Rexburg with that. And then when all this kind of kicked off, for us, was when we got that call from Arizona about Tammy, and something could have been suspicious with her death, with Lori and Chad and everything going on. And so that's when I took a call from one of the deputies saying, hey, we got this call from Arizona about all this. And so it was just odd, because I'm like, well, let's get the blood going, if we drew any blood with the coroner or at the funeral home. And for us, that's where things kind of got, I guess, a little weird. We got 2 missing kids. Chad and Lori just got married. Chad's wife dead. And so that's kind of where we started with me and Detective Mattingly, just kind of support, if you want to put it that way, until we really got involved with it.
And then Alex Cox dies. Right. Do you all remember
Oh,
learning
yeah.
that news?
We were actually at a training in Las Vegas, and there was an Arizona guy a lieutenant from, I believe it was Chandler, and he knew we were from Idaho area
We
working the
talked to him
case.
there.
Yeah.
Right.
And that day we're in there, and he comes up to us. He's like, "Hey, have you guys heard?" I'm like, "Well, what are you talking about?" And that's when he told us that Alex just died.
What do you think?
Crazy.
Well, how did he die? Well, we're not sure. And then he explained to us kind of the situation of the officer and what they saw when they responded over there. And the first thing that goes into your mind is, this is all part of the same thing. You know, how does he just die the day after the Tammy is exhumed out of the ground?
Yeah.
What are the chances? And so, yeah, you're like, well,
How does this play into this? What has happened here? And later on in the investigation, we had a chance to talk with a pathologist from down there in Utah and Arizona, and that was a question that was posed to them by me. Like, explain it to me. And the explanation is exactly what it is now from them to me then, was, a pulmonary embolism. I'm like, but the day after Tammy is exhumed.
So what do you think? Do you think something more happened with Alex?
It's hard to wrap your head around that. He dies the next day after Tammy's exhumed out of the ground. How can you not but ask that question of, is that possible? And really, this is the same question I asked the pathologist when we were meeting with him at one point in time during this investigation. Is that possible? How does that happen? And their answer is basically, look, we did the autopsy. This is what we found. This is what we're ruling this as. But you walk away just going,
A little bizarre.
it is bizarre.
What do you think, Vinny?
I'm the same. It's hard to go against what the ME rules, but right after Tammy's exhumed, some comments were made to Zulema that she had testified to, and so he makes that trip to Mexico. I've got some thoughts. It doesn't add up for me, but that's kind of where we are right now.
I was in Mexico a few weeks ago. You can get all sorts of any drug you want on every corner.
Yep.
Prescription drugs or whatever, which is what he got, right? So,
But I also know that the board that they ran, what is it called?
The what?
Expanded board of toxicology tests that it's one of the biggest ones they've done on anybody looking for a reason. And they couldn't come up with any reason still except for a pulmonary embolism. So
he drops dead. You still have Lori and Chad on the loose. Were you ever nervous or worried, like, for your safety?
I remember when we were trying to find them and all this stuff was happening, and even it was always in the back of your mind a little. But I think as a cops, it's always in your mind just a little bit. We tend to be a little bit more protective of ourselves and our families at home. But yeah, I mean, there was. I remember at that time I was out building a barn behind my house, and I was building a barn with a gun on my hip. You just didn't know. This thing was just so weird and unexplainable, and it was just going off in all different directions that, I think myself and other officers involved were taking some precautions just because you don't know, and nobody really knew where they were at that time.
Then you find out they're in Hawaii, and you go over to Hawaii with Hermosillo and Lieutenant Powell and some of the other officers. What was supposed to happen during that? It was a Sunday afternoon when they ended up getting pulled over, and the car was seized. But that wasn't the original plan, right?
It wasn't the original plan, but I think it worked out pretty good anyway.
It worked out good for me, just to be honest with you.
But I think that getting them to where they pulled over at that location and having officers there, the Kauai Police Department, they were phenomenal in their help with us. I mean, they were great. Can't give them enough compliments. They were awesome. And when we executed that stop and pulled them over in that parking lot, Ray and I and Joe Powell, we just stepped back and let them do their thing. They knew what we were looking for, and we just let them go do their thing. They did a great job.
Kauai.
Just outstanding. Kauai, sorry.
And was that the first time you saw Lori since you had served the warrant? Or you hadn't even served the warrant, since you went and knocked on her door and asked about the kids?
Yes.
And the first time you'd seen Chad?
Yes.
Do you remember what you thought, seeing them there in their beach attire? And
Well, so Lori at that point in time was sitting in a patrol car by the time,
okay.
and Kauai Police Department was seizing her car, and she was sitting in a patrol car, and Chad was sitting in another patrol car, and myself and an FBI agent that went over with us, we walked up to Lori, and we asked Lori. First of all, we told Lori, "Come on, tell us where the kids are. Let's fix this. Let's bring these kids home. Enough of having us chase everybody around and doing all these things." And Lori at that point looked up at the FBI agent who was there, and his name's Travis Homer, great guy, special agent or an agent out of Pocatello office. She looked up at him, really tightened her lips, like really a defiant look, and just shook her head. Nope. No. And I was like, wow. She was so defiant. That's what really sticks out in my mind. And then we continued to try talking her into, we know you have an attorney. Let's sit down. Let's bring these kids home. No. Okay, well, we'll be in town for a few days. We'd like to sit down with you. We can get your attorney, and we'll figure this out. And that was all she said. And then went to Chad, who was sitting in another vehicle, and I said, "Chad, this is who I am. We're here. You got to know we're serious. We've traveled clear over here to Kauai now trying to locate these kids. I know you have an attorney. Let's sit down and try to, figure out a way to bring these kids home." And at that point, Chad was pretty nervous, visibly nervous. He was shaking. He was scared. But he wouldn't talk to us. So that pretty much ended our conversation until the second time we went to Hawaii, when the arrest of Lori was made.
And did she talk to you then?
No. After she was arrested on the warrant, she was taken to the Kauai Police Department's jail. And after she was booked in, I met with her again, and I said, "Lori, remember who I am?" And she said, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Hey, look, help me here. Help me bring these kids home. We can end this all today if you'll just help me bring these kids home." Because at the time, there's still part of me that believes these kids could be still alive.
Right.
Right.
Did you think that?
Nate, I struggle sometimes with that. I don't know if it's that I didn't want to believe that somebody would kill children over no reason, or if I just didn't know.
Right.
I wanted to believe that these kids were alive. And I might have been, at that point in time, one of the few that was still holding out hope, with conversations we had with officers and stuff. But I wanted to believe that they were still alive. And so when I'm questioning, I'm like, "Let me help you bring these kids home." And she was still extremely defiant. Wanted nothing to do with it. Wanted nothing to do with us. So after she'd been arrested, and when she was getting put into a Kauai Police Department's car, I went over and talked to Chad, who was standing by his vehicle. And this is in the parking lot, or excuse me, on the roadway right in front of their residence over there in Kauai. And I went to Chad, and he knew who I was. And I again said, Chad, I hope you know we're serious here. Look, she's going to jail. This can all end today. Come in and talk to me. Let's bring these kids home. And again, at this time, Chad, his demeanor had changed. It was a visible change for us, for both Detective Hermosillo and I that were talking to him. It was a visible change that it went from scared to now almost like a defiant attitude, like Lori had been giving us the whole time. And I went, wow, that's a turnaround within a couple of weeks. He wanted nothing to do with us. And the only thing he said to me is, no, can I have my keys?
That was it.
Okay, here's your keys. So that's about really the only, after that, besides serving Lori with some papers in jail, that's about really the only interaction I had with either her or Chad.
Right. Till the day you arrested them.
All right.
Did you think they were alive, Vinny? That early?
We always had that hope. I had that hope. That's best outcome, and that's what we wanted. I think everyone's, at least my mind changed when she got back to Madison County, and all she needed to do was provide the kids to us. And the day of her court, there were no kids.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of detectives and everyone just, now this search has changed a little bit.
Right.
You know, it was always the same, but we're focused on this now.
Wouldn't it have been something if she showed up with the kids?
She showed up
Would've
with the
been
kids,
awesome.
she'd been released 10 minutes later.
Right?
You know.
Story would have been over.
Yeah.
But when the kids didn't come through the back door or into the door of the courtroom there, and they went through that whole hearing, and now she's getting led off back towards jail, and Chad's there, and he's being walked out by his attorney, and you're like, there's something else. At that point in time, I feared the worst. I think that's when the realization that we are probably looking for children who are not alive anymore really set in.
After I tried to speak with them in Hawaii, they went into a hotel, into a resort. We left, me and our news team, and what did you all do? Do you remember? Like, did you stake out the place? That's what I'm asked probably a lot about. What happened then, like in case they came out and tried to flee or...
We were doing surveillance on our house while we were over there prior to the search.
On the townhome.
On the townhome, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd been doing surveillance. After it was served, or excuse me, you're talking about after she went into the resort, right?
Right. Her and Chad, I'm questioning, and they went into a back door of the hotel.
Right.
We then left. I think they spent the night there.
You know what? We didn't. We did for a while. We didn't spend all night on surveillance. There was evidence that had to be checked into Kauai that we were dealing with some of that stuff on, and but we tried to maintain some surveillance over there because we wanted to see if they would take us to where the children were or give us some clue show some sign of life.
Right.
And the time that when we were doing that, they gave no indication. There was no sign of the children. I think Chad and Lori were pretty much to their own over there in Kauai. But also by that time, there was a lot of people in Kauai that knew who they were.
Right.
There was actually a lot. I remember going around in Kauai at the airport and other places, and they by that time knew, especially if you're trying to check into an airport and you're from Rexburg, Idaho, and you're police officers, and they know that Lori and Chad are over there. Some of those people I had conversations with Detective Hermosillo and I about, get her off our island, go get her.
And they were putting up signs on post, where are
Yeah.
the kids? I know that the next day too, Dateline, they had tried, Lori and Chad had tried to leave the hotel to go out to the beach. And Dateline, they had a producer there that approached them. So in my mind, they clearly seemed to not be bothered by the fact that they had just been pulled over. You seized their car, they've been served these court papers, and they're going to go spend the day at the beach.
Yeah.
So they're brought back here. Do you remember when they were brought back here in that hearing for Lori at Madison County, beginning of March? There's hundreds and hundreds of people trying to get in there. She comes in the lipstick and shows up. Is that kind of when you thought too, like, again, she clearly could show the kids here and this would not be a thing, but she's actually going to go to jail?
Absolutely. I mean, that at that point, when she left that courtroom, I remember talking to some of the other detectives. Man, those kids didn't show up. And all she had to do that day was provide the children, and she would have been gone. Rob Wood was willing to drop charges. She's out the door.
Good.
Children didn't show up, and that's when you start realizing, and I mean, when you start talking, okay, kids didn't show up. Now what do we do?
Yeah.
She's locked up. Chad isn't. He's calling her daily. I think it came out in court sometimes 10, 12 times a day.
Yeah.
And you all are listening to the calls. What
Yep.
was that like?
Painful.
It's a lot.
You would listen to those phone calls, and not, it wasn't just with Chad. It was all of Lori's phone calls she made to any people, but majority were all to Chad. If trying to think that if there were any that weren't.
Maybe the mom.
Yeah, there was a few that weren't, but majority to Chad. And you got to understand, we've got guys listening to those every day, and that's part of their job, right? Like there was a lot of manpower and hours just on focusing on phone calls.
And they played one in court, and they're talking in code about the pool and Alex texting Chad and all of that. So are you trying to figure out what they mean while trying to look for clues or hints that might actually help?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you listen to those phone calls and they throw you, a little bit of a hint, you can kind of tell they're talking in code. Now you have to try to figure out what that actually means, what they're trying to say. And actually, I thought we did a pretty good job at it.
Yeah.
But it was painful. It was hours. There were days they'd have 2 or 3 conversations, an hour long each conversation. I mean, it was hours of listening, and just it was painful. It was tough to listen to at times. It was frustrating for people.
Was it mainly religious talk or like lovey-dovey type stuff? What?
It was a lot of I would say
both.
yeah.
A lot of lovey-dovey.
There was some religion aspects in it,
Yeah.
but a lot of it was, I love you. Oh, you're so sweet, and it just got to the point where you're like, how much more can I possibly take?
Did they maintain a feeling of hope in those calls that like this? We're going to be out. We're going to be
Yeah.
together. Like this is nothing.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's all part of the plan. It was all part of the plan. It's Heavenly Father's plan. We just got to, stay strong and compare themselves to certain biblical people and people in the Book of Mormon. Comparing themselves to them. This is what these people had to go through. These are trials. We're having the same trials. And you're on the other side listening to this, just shaking your head going, what is this? What are they doing? What's this about? And that went on for months, hours of listening.
She's booked in March. End of May is when, but correct me if I don't have the timeline exactly right, you all got some of the data back from Alex's phones and Lori's iCloud. You basically learned about this pet cemetery. Mm-hmm. You also had the GPS coordinates of where Alex's phone had been.
Correct.
So walk us through how you were able to put together the exact points on that property of where those kids were found to where when you went on that day in June, within hours they're found.
Well, it was pretty much the information that you were just talking about. There was a day just prior to June 9th, that the day that we were on the properties from the search warrant, the day we found the children. We had been down, we knew about the pet cemetery, we knew about these locations that Alex had been on the property. We were down in, I believe it was Rob Wood and Detective Hermosillo.
Yeah.
I don't think you were there.
No.
We had been down visiting with the Williams and learning more about this pet cemetery. And on the way back, driving, I get a call from Special Agent Ricky Wright of the FBI. And he says, hey, I just was on the phone with one of our analysts, and this is what he told us, or told Ricky, was that the text conversation that he had found about the raccoon, about burning the branches that day, and before the oncoming storm, and at that point I'm like, I've been around enough, and I'm big in the outdoors, that I find it's not impossible to have a raccoon on your property
In
that morning.
Yeah.
But they're a nocturnal animal. And I remember having this conversation with these guys in this car. That doesn't sound right. And then we're talking about the timing of it all. And you're starting to draw a pretty good picture for us, right? So I then called Ricky right back, and I said, Ricky, check back with Ben, who was the analyst at the time. And I said, find out how many times that phone has been on the property, and since Alex was here.
Right.
And he called back a short time later and says, those are the only times. The day before the last sighting of the children. Mm-hmm. And when he said that, I went, we were all in the car, like, that's where they are. Mm. That's where they are. That we were close anyway. I think we were close to getting a search warrant to get on that property. But that text, in my opinion, that text from Chad to Tammy put us over the top and got us on that property.
Hadn't the focus kind of been Yellowstone, though?
We were talking
a
little bit with the park investigators. They have,
right.
the rangers up there, they have an investigation group. We were talking about things we could do to go up there and possibly look at different locations in the park.
Right.
And they were even looking at bear trackers and wolf trackers, collared bears, to see areas where animals could be feeding. And we were kind of getting that plotted out with them when this happened. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of moved away from that and concentrated on the field behind Chad's house.
And then you're meeting with Jason and Samantha, and you ask, where's the pet cemetery? And she says, oh, it's right here.
What's it there?
Which is right where the phone had been.
Right.
And from there, didn't things happen didn't the timeline get sped up quite a bit to get on that property and do the search?
Yeah, it went really quick. I remember when these guys were coming back from talking with Samantha, Ron called and says, Vinny, we need to meet up. Like, we got to talk. And it was about the information he had just got from Special Agent Wright. And I got informed of that, and Rob was getting a warrant off that, plus more information that we already had, right? And it became all hands on deck. Let's get a ops plan together, do a briefing, make sure we have everything together, what we need. The other thing, there's a lot of people that were involved on these 2 days, and trying to get everybody in on the same page is a lot of work. So it went quick. We did a great job at it, I think. But yeah, there was a lot of fast.
There was a lot of logistic things that we had to take care of.
Yes.
Getting the FBI evidence team up here, getting their equipment up here, getting officers, all the detectives, surveillance on the place. The night before we served that search warrant, we had a big meeting at the Rexburg Police Department's training facility, and I think I remember counting total people there. There were about 60 people in that room. And at that point in time, we went over the information we had, how we got the search warrant, what we planned for the next day, who was going to do what. I think, if I remember, I was talking up there and said, okay, we're going to meet here this time. Vinny, Detective Hermosillo, Detective Stubbs, And Detective Mattingly, we're going to go to the house. We're going to introduce ourselves. We're going to serve them with a search warrant. When we get the house secured, we're going to have everybody come over. And that's exactly what happened. So the next day, and then when we got the house secured, we were turning the house over to the FBI evidence team to run their search the way they wanted it. They're the experts, right?
So it's not like you all showed up at once.
No,
Yeah.
no.
It was small team in the beginning.
Right.
The other thing you got to remember too is we're trying to get all these guys together, but you also need to be quiet about it.
Right.
Right. So we've got 50, 60 guys in there, and everyone's good with keeping things on the down low, but there's always that chance, and it's like, okay, we got to have our briefing, have our meeting, and then we're doing this right away. We're not sitting on it for a couple days or a week. Like, we're getting things lined out and we're going.
You did it the night before, so did you sleep much that night? Or was it like an excitement, like this could be it?
A little bit of both.
Both. There was a little bit of the anticipation of the unknown, right? Are we right, or are we wrong? Was also there. But yeah, I was nervous. I was like, there had been so many hours Nate put into this thing prior to that search warrant. You got to remember when this case kicked off, and help me remember this, Vinny, but it was almost a daily meeting with detectives.
Yeah.
And that's detectives from the RPD that were involved. At the time, I think we still had to have detectives doing general cases and stuff for the police department. But most of my detectives were daily in a meeting with Fremont County
FBI.
prosecutors, FBI, special agents Ricky Wright and Travis Homer. They became part of the Rexburg Police Department. Mm-hmm. We gave them a key to get in. Yeah. They were there every day. I haven't got, I can't say enough about them. They were instrumental in this. They were great to work with. And they were at our office almost every day for hours. And I'm glad they showed up because this case got complex and we were able to use some of their expertise in cases they had done before that helped us now. Because none of us in the police department had been involved in something like this to this magnitude. Mm-hmm. And so I was, and I'm sure Vinny's the same way, we were happy to have them, and they did a great job.
So June 9th, 2020, you go over with Ray and some of the other guys at Vinny, and it's like 7 a.m. Mm-hmm. Wake Chad up, mm-hmm. And what was
walked upstairs to where Chad was sleeping.
There's two stories in the home.
I'll tell you, I walked upstairs
okay.
to where Chad was sleeping.
Yeah.
And I said, Chad, and he knew who I was. Hey, this is Ron. I need you to get up. And I got some papers I need to serve. We're here to serve a search warrant. Only thing he has, can I call my attorney? Well, yes, you can. So we got him up and we walked him downstairs and put him in the kitchen, and I got him on the phone with his attorney at that time. And the other detectives got the house secured. That time, I think all of us kids were there, weren't they?
Emma was over at her place.
Emma may not have been.
Mattingly and I kind of just stayed outside when you guys went in.
So we just got everybody secured in the house, and once that was done, we called for everybody else to come over.
So what was your assignment that day, to stay with Chad?
No, my assignment was to oversee everything until the FBI team got there.
Right. And your assignment was keep the house secure?
So I went up with these guys, stayed on the outs, and then I was over the surveillance team.
Okay.
And then once the ERT team got there, there were more assignments given out, and we were assigned where to dig.
Right.
And also doing our other assignment, right, with surveillance, keeping them updated, where Chad was at all times. Because the point of our surveillance was if Chad were to leave the house, we were going to follow him. Mm-hmm. until we were done with that search of the house and the property.
And he goes out and sits in his car.
Mm-hmm.
And are you getting updates on what he's doing? The fact he's looking over his shoulder and on the phone and
I was actually out on the road with Ray at one point in time. This time the canines are in the backyard. The canines are doing the first search of the property, the cadaver dogs. And so there was one point in time where Chad is on the phone and Ray and I are on the road talking about it. He looks nervous to us. He's looking around, rubbing his head, takes his hat off, rubs his head, just looks really nervous. And he's paying special attention to these canine dogs, or the cadaver dogs, where they're looking. But these dogs aren't alerting. And Ray, having been a former canine officer, I've been a former canine officer. And as I'm watching these dogs and he's watching, we're like, we don't see these dogs alerting to anything. Now we're not the handler and we're out on the roadway, but we're not seeing anything. And I remember asking Ray, are we wrong? Are we wrong? Have we done all this and we're wrong? And in the meantime, Chad is obviously nervous. He was in his car. He's out of his car. He was worried.
and then they find JJ.
Yeah.
And were you all like radioed, like we found them?
No.
How word spread, or
I don't think that's not how it worked. We knew the areas we were searching, and I think Doug Hart, who, is just a great investigator. He'd kind of had, I believe, some experience in looking for
Clandestine
graves
graves,
and stuff. So, but I was standing over there near the pet cemetery, and I remember David Stubbs coming up to him and says, "Hey, Ron, you got to come and see this." So he took me over to the tree near where JJ was buried, and we walked over there, and we kind of moved the grass away a little bit, and you could see the outline of basically the grave where the sod had been replaced, and I remember, us having, that's where he is. That is where he is. That's where we're going to find him. And you're like, at that point, you're like, wow, is this really happening? Mm-hmm. Is this happening? And
you spent 8 months wondering where these kids are.
And yep, here he is. Here he is right here. And so at that point, everybody kind of quit what they were doing when we started removing the layers off that grave. And everybody kind of come over to that same area. And as they started removing the layers, and you saw the rocks that were on top, you saw the dirt around it, you saw the board, and you're just, it's hard to express it unless you're there and you're seeing this happen, because you know what the ultimate find is going to be here. You're going to find this little boy in here. But part of you like, is this really happening? And sure enough, it is happening right in front of you. It was...
Yeah, there's so many emotions going on. You've worked on this for a long time. You're happy, you're sad, you're excited, you're mad, and then when that cut's made in the plastic and you see his hair right there, I mean, it's crazy. It's hard to explain. Mm-hmm. Emotions are everywhere, and I remember Rob, he's like, "Go get him.
Go get Chad."
Well, yeah. Nate, there's I don't consider myself a real emotional guy, but there's a couple times during this case where I did get a little emotional. And at the point where you see that, that's JJ in the ground. You found him. This little boy, he's been put in this grave. He's dead. Emotions kind of got the best of me there. And there's really only one other time that it got the best of me. But after we found him, we were kind of getting organized what to do next. And we had surveillance on Chad at the house. And that one of the officers doing the surveillance, I believe it was Rick Schmidt with the police department, he said, or one of the other detectives. It says, "Hey, Chad's leaving in his car." So I yelled at Rob, says, "Hey, Rob, Chad's leaving." And Rob says, "You need to go stop him." So at that point is when Chad drove away, and we had guys go get him and pull him over.
And you went.
And I went and talked to him.
So what was that like?
Well, I walked up to Chad and I said, "Chad, we found JJ. I believe we're going to find Tylee. And I know you got an attorney, so, basically not going to ask you any questions. But we are going to detain you for a while. We got your car here." And I said, "What do you want me to go tell your kids?" Because I knew that he'd been over at Emma's house, and he and his kids had been over there. Mm-hmm. And we had this car on the side of the road. And his comment to me was, "Nothing, I already told him I'd probably be going to jail today." Mm. And I went, wow,
Was he calm? Was he?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He was
not
calm.
Hysterical? Just...
No.
Same as he always been through the whole trial.
No.
Yeah, so he said, "I already told him I'm going to jail today."
Doesn't look like, the only change in his behavior that I ever seen was when we first met with him in Kauai at his car, and he was scared to death. And then, from the second time on, every time we had any kind of interaction with him, it was always the same. No, very little emotion out of him.
So he's put in the back of the police car, and we saw some of the camera footage in the trial,
right,
where he's talking to his daughter and talking all about finances. Pay this bill. Here's the credit card. Here's this. Here's that. And then he tells her, "I'm probably not coming back."
Yeah.
You obviously didn't hear that conversation at the time, but when you reviewed that later.
Well, it's the same thing that he said at the traffic stop, basically. He knows he's going to jail. I don't know if he's prepared himself mentally or what's gone on with him, but he knows he's going to jail. And he's now letting his kids know, "I'm probably not coming back." Not like he never one time said, "I want to go and explain this. I want to go and tell them what's happening," And I think there's a reason for it, obviously. So
then you find JJ, or then you find Tylee. Mm-hmm. And what was that like?
That was
same. And hers was, again, it's hard to explain. It's something that, as law enforcement or people in general, you never want to see, smell, go through. The guys out there, it's crazy. They were tough, strong, and having to go through that and do that, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's not fun. But again, it goes back to so many emotions of we spent all this time on this, and we're getting a little bit of closure. And I say a little bit because there's people responsible for this. And now our work's going to start.
Whole new phase.
Yep.
Yeah.
But you went to the autopsies.
And so did Vinny.
Oh, you both did?
Yeah. There was Vinny and I and Ray.
In the corner.
Rob Wood.
Had you been to autopsies before?
Oh, yeah.
You had,
Yeah.
okay. What, of children?
Yes.
Yeah.
Was this one different?
Yeah.
There's certain things about this case that will always stick out in your mind,
Yeah.
right? And more than other events that happened. That autopsy was something I won't forget. I'm sure it'll always stick in these other guys' minds as one of the things through this investigation that was a step back moment. You're like, wait a minute, what are we just seeing here? So when they brought, they had JJ out there and he was on the table and we were standing on the one side of the room and the pathologist and his assistant were doing the thing. Well, they opened up that bag and we were probably 15 feet away or
From here to the wall. It was they got a new facility since then.
Yeah.
But you're right there.
I was I remember when he opened that bag and opened it up, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I had to walk closer because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You know, you're looking at this child, and here's this child with a bag over his head and duct tape, and a lot of duct tape. And then you're seeing the way he's bound. And you know, there was no doubt prior to getting there what this was. I mean, this was a homicide. But you're looking at that, and now you're seeing what kind of a homicide this is. You know, we're seasoned detectives. We can look at it and see just how this child died. We don't need a pathologist. We're looking at it. And I was stunned that this is how this child was murdered, what they did to him. It was a step back moment for me that I won't forget.
Yeah, I think everybody in that room, once the ME cut the plastic open, everyone, you could just feel in that room, everyone just took a breath and was like, wow. Even the MEs, you know, we got a homicide.
And it's
Yeah.
horrific. It's,
Yeah.
And then Tylee, what's left of her.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Tylee was different than JJ's because what was, you know, here you have a body of a little boy. Tylee, there wasn't much left.
Right.
You know, out at the scene when her remains are being exhumed, I remember standing on the side of the hole where officers were in there, and they had screens they were sifting through and pulling out small pieces of bone, and it's, you know, you're just like, how did this even happen? Who would do this to a teenage girl? And now you're seeing what's left of her on a table. And for months you've been looking for this. What we had is pictures of Tylee. We had pictures of Tylee in our office. You know, those pictures of Tylee and JJ together. That I wanted that up there so that people were reminded this is who we're looking for. And I remember looking at that and then remembering that photograph that was in our war room is what we called it. I'm like, this is what's left of that teenage girl. It was sad. It was sad.
You said that you got choked up the one time. What was the other time?
The other time would have been at the autopsy with JJ. I just, you know, it was to know what that little boy probably went through. It was, you know, it was emotional. You know, it was hard.
Was there one piece of evidence or one moment where you said, okay, this is it. We got them. Was it the day those kids were found?
No, I would go back to the text about the raccoon, about burning the branches on the property. When we got that, you know, because we were trying to figure out a way to get on that property. We were close. We thought we knew where they were, but to get that text put us over the edge. And I was like, you know, now we got them. Let's go do this. And that's when we put our team together and went and got it done. But there's several throughout this investigation.
Right.
Several things that you're like, huh, well, that'll help.
That's a hard thing is we got thrown loops left and right in this whole investigation. You can never count on one thing, it seemed like it. As soon as we went this way, because we got a tip or a lead or we thought, it comes way over here, and now you're looking over here, and then this was by far is going to be, and I hope it's going to be, the most craziest case we ever work in our careers.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you're waiting for Tammy's autopsy to get back. What was that day like when you found out it's asphyxiation?
A little bit of jaw dropping. I remember those got mailed to us, and Lieutenant Powell came and handed them to me. That's when I'll start in the case pretty hard. and read those, and we had a meeting, I think that day or
Was
the
that
next day.
It was that day. Yeah.
And just reading through that, you know, because we had a lot of tips coming in on poison and just flooded with all kinds of things. And so when that came in, it was cool. It was a relief that we finally got something on her after all this time. You know, she got exhumed. She's at the MEs in Utah, and it's taking so long. So to get that paper and go through it and see that, when I read homicide, I was like, wow. Tammy, we were trying to figure that out. Was it a natural cause? Really weird, kind of like
Coincidence.
yeah, right. And then so to finally get something nailed down, it was just it felt good. A little relief, like you were saying, we're getting there now. And then asphyxiation, you're just like, what? And I'm reading through it to see if there's any sign of poison or something else in her system or an overdose or something, and nothing that I could see. And then we had a meeting, and I called Ray and Ron. I'm like, hey, I got the autopsy paperwork back on Tammy.
Well, I don't even think Ray was there. I think David Stubbs were in Cancun on a vacation with their wives, and I remember Vinny coming through the back door, and he says, I'm like, well, what is it? Homicide. I'm like, you know, and everybody's like, yes, what kind of homicide? And he tells them, like, you know, that's just one of the moments you're just like, yes, you get re-energized,
Right.
Yeah.
I would say.
Huge
know,
sure.
point. Do you think Chad and Alex were both involved in Tammy's death?
Me, yes, I do.
You do. You
Yes.
think both of them? What do you think, Ron?
I believe Alex was. I got to tell you, Nate, to be honest with you, I don't know if I can put Chad there. I don't know if Chad...
As far as physically doing it.
Right. Never a question that Chad was involved in this.
Right.
Never, ever questioned that. But there's some evidence there I think kind of leads you to maybe two people had to do what they did. But then I kind of struggle a little bit with Chad's character, whether or not he would do the actual physical part of her homicide. And that's where I kind of stray off, that maybe he wasn't there and Alex was the only one. So,
What was the biggest challenge with the case?
I would say just a daily grind for months. Again,
For years.
yes. Really, it was. Because when this case started, and once it took off, it was every single day for almost 6 months of meetings with detectives, prosecutors, FBI agents. Their analysis would come over. They were great. And everybody worked as a team on a daily basis. I've been around law enforcement over 30 years, and I've done a lot of cases around where multi-jurisdictions get involved, and sometimes it doesn't work so good. Sometimes there's some contention, some fighting, and with LEO, law enforcement officers, I never felt that. Did we always agree on everything? No. And that's good. That's good. It keeps you always thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But, it was a daily grind for almost 6 months until we found the bodies. And then even after that, we were still meeting, maybe not as much, but we were still meeting as an investigation group on this until we went to trial. And then even up to trial, we were meeting a lot. So, from when the kids were reported missing, clear up till we went to trial with Lori, it was a lot of meeting, a lot of preparedness, a lot of trying to get extra finishing touches on evidence and that kind of thing. After Lori's case was gone or over, I remember coming back to the PD and meeting with my guys and saying, okay, we are not doing a thing on Daybell Vallow unless it's a have-to-do thing for 6 months. at least.
Just to
We're
unplug.
done.
Yeah.
Done. Because, you know, you got to give them a break. You
Right.
have to give them a break. And so that's kind of what we did. Unless it was a necessary thing that needed to be done, we just kind of went on and did our own thing. You know, we started receiving these other investigations that police departments usually end up doing. And that was kind of reprieve from having to deal with the Daybell Val thing all the time. But in preparing for Chad's, things got wrapped up again, and a lot of meetings and a lot of discussion started again.
Vinny, what would you say is the most challenging?
I go with that. The other thing, you know, is you're trying to balance work, home life, kids, all that, you know. Our family supports, at least mine's awesome. I know everyone else is great too. So you're trying to balance all that, plus get extra cases in. Fremont County, at the time, we had me and Detective Mattingly, so we're working other cases on top of meeting day in and day out. But I'd say that, and trying to get all the interviews. In this case, there were so many interviews, and so we're going from, you know, Rexburg to Utah to Arizona, and we get back home, and it's like, hey, we got to go back over to Arizona, and it's just a lot. You know, it was nonstop. So
There was a huge financial burden. I think I think you reported on some of this stuff too. It was a huge financial burden, and I will. The city of Rexburg, they knew the importance of finding these kids, and you know, I didn't try to go out and spend frivolously, you know, but it was expensive. Trips to Kauai are not cheap.
Right.
But I felt, and Ray felt like it was important that we go over there. The back and forth trips from Arizona, there was a couple times we had almost every detective at the Rexburg PD in Fremont County and some special agents out of FBI in Utah or Arizona doing stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And now you're footing that bill. There was a financial burden, but you know, I never got second guessed on anything by anybody. Their attitude was like ours. Find the children. Where are they at? You know, get this thing solved.
And build a solid case.
Build a solid case.
You mentioned a little bit, Vinny, about the emotional toll, but how did you handle this all emotionally and personally and family?
I think it's different for everybody. Everybody handles things different, right? Bad crashes or this case. Some of us just hold it in. I don't want to go home and tell my wife what I do and what I saw that day, or, you know, I don't want to burden her with that. But she was always there, right? She knew when came home you had a long day and dinner's ready, or, you know, she's taking care of the kids. So it was great that way. But it's just all of us handle it different. I'm one that's a little closed off and just kind of deals with it. Sometimes that's not always the best, but that's just how I've always been. Some guys just handle it different. You know, I'm not sure how sheriff or anyone else, but the other thing is I could go talk to the sheriff.
Right.
I could go talk to Ray. I could go talk to Dave Stubbs or Chuck, and, you know, and that was my venting, because they know what I'm going through. I know what they're going through. And instead of bringing my family, I don't want to, you know, tell them about everything and have them be thinking about that.
Right.
You know, and I agree with Vinny on this, that everybody kind of handles this a little different. I think Vinny or I just have the type of personalities that we can file this back in our mind and only bring it out when we want to bring it out. But some of these guys really struggled with it. I remember a particular time during Lori's trial that we had a detective who had testified who was struggling with it. Got it, you know, he was emotional. And he, even when he got done testifying, he was still struggling with it, you know. And what I like is this group of guys, these investigators who have, you know, spent so much time together and seen so much, you know, as an investigation group with each other, we pick him up. and we help him. And, you know, and I think that's the one thing that I'm probably more proud of about this case, besides finding the kids and getting justice for them,
Yeah.
and justice for Tammy, is the camaraderie that this group has. And that goes outside the investigation group, too. It goes with the prosecutors, too. We're all now bound by a tragedy that should have never happened. But, you know, we've grown closer, a lot closer, and we learn to depend on each other. So it makes it easy Vinny's at my office all the time now. I talk to Vinny about it,
Right.
you know, or Ray's a phone call away. Rob's across the parking lot.
Yeah.
You know, we can, and we do talk about it still. Someday we won't, but
I could spend another hour talking to you about it, but I won't. I'll let you all go. Is there anything that you want to add? Anything I didn't want to ask? Biggest takeaway from the whole thing?
I would just like to, I hope that the family can get peace, and I think they have. I felt bad through this investigation. You know you're close, you know you're on the right path. You want to tell them things, give them hope that you're not just sitting on your hands not doing anything, but you can't just release everybody the information that you're doing, right? So I hope the family can get some peace out of this, out of the investigation, the verdict. After they're done in Arizona with Lori, I hope they have a chance to heal and move on.
Would you want to talk to Lori or Chad?
Oh, I'd love to talk to them. Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
It'd be nice to just, and if they were going to be honest, right?
Yeah.
It'd be nice to see what they were thinking, why, how, all that. I think all of us would like to talk with Lori and Chad at some point. I don't know if that'll ever happen. You might have a better chance than we do, but it'd be nice.
I think you said it so yourself. I mean, it would be nice to ask Chad. Chad, were you there? I got my ideas, but and hopefully he'd give a straight answer.
Yeah, that's the key, to be honest. And if you could believe him.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add, Vinny?
The victims in this case, there was a lot, and you always want them to get peace. It's hard to see them all get peace because they lost somebody. Sam lost her best friend. The kids lost Tammy. Tylee and JJ gone. So the peace I hope they all get. On the other side of that, this case has built up so many good relationships with them, right? With the Williams, with the family, with Colby, everybody. We would have never met them, I probably wouldn't have worked as close as I do with Rexburg PD guys and FBI guys. I wouldn't know some of the FBI guys. So on that side, this case has brought really good friendships. Other agencies, Bonneville, Jefferson, had reached out to all of us. Hey, if you guys need help with your general cases, let us know and we'll come help you out. So up and down the valley, throughout everywhere, it's just, it's brought a good friendship with law enforcement, victims, families, and all that. So
really a model of how this thing should work.
yeah.
At the end of the day, there truly is kind of a model example of how an investigation like this and the cooperation between everybody. And again, it's not like we didn't have our differences at times, but what was the goal? What's the big target here? What are you trying to achieve? And everybody was able to kind of put these little things aside, and that's why, we have the outcome that we have. And I think that's one of the things I walk away most proud of, is that how we all came together and did it.
Yeah. Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks to the entire team. Chief Deputy Vinny Kaaiakamanu, Sheriff Ron Ball, both of the Madison County Sheriff's Office. And thank you for watching.